Hello, I'm Paul Laney, the retired sheriff from Cass County, North Dakota, and the current vice president of national sales for Turnkey Corrections.
And I'm Lauren Matthews, and I'm the current social media and content specialist here at Turnkey.
And you are listening to Jail Talk. Lauren, good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too.
It's been a couple of weeks.
It has.
We here at the Jail Talk team, all of us involved in the episodes that occur were exposed in one way or another in our personal lives to the coronavirus. So we got to live the quarantine life. So it's been a little while since we've crossed paths.
It has.
But we're back and we're here and we're bringing you another Jail Talk.
That's right. I'm glad to be out of my apartment. I was starting to go a little crazy in that little apartment.
I hear you.
Paul, you're still looking like you're kind of in quarantine, though. I mean, you got a little extra scruff going on there.
Yeah. Well, you know, I do live on the North Shore.
That's
I live
fair.
in the northern woods of northern Minnesota. When in Rome.
We've had some snow, so keeping you warm.
It's time to start getting the look. So,
that's fair.
But we kind of have a cool thing happening here today, don't we?
We do.
A special treat for our listeners. So we are here today with the man, the myth, the legend himself, a man that needs no introduction in the sheriff's world. We are here with Sheriff Dave Mahoney, the Dane County, Wisconsin sheriff, but also the current national president of the National Sheriff's Association. And Dave, I cannot tell you how excited we are to have you here today. So thank you for coming in. Some rough weather and a little excitement getting here, but you're here, and we can't wait to share your knowledge with our listeners.
That's right.
Well, thanks, Paul. It's an honor to join you here today on Jail Talk. You know, I watch these podcasts on a regular basis myself, and it's also good to join you as a sheriff again. And Lauren, it's great to join you.
Yeah.
You know, I watch you all the time on these podcasts, and it's just good to be with both of you to talk about issues of importance to our nation's sheriffs.
Did you know we were going to have royalty with us today?
You know, I heard that. Paul, you forget, I do all the research around here. So I've read his very extensive bio, and it is beyond impressive.
He's got a very, very solid bio, and we're going to talk about that bio in a second. And on the same front, you know, we got to work together for years at NSA. We've known each other for many, many years. I like to tease him all the time because a lot of people don't know this, but the reason he's so quality and so good and gone so far in his life is, I just got a quick question. Where were you born? Fargo, North Dakota. How about that? Right where I'd been sheriff. So we're very proud that he was born there. You weren't there for very long. Your dad was on quite the circuit as he built his life and his livelihood, which was another story. If you've ever met Dave's dad, very cool man and somebody very exciting to know. So yeah, we go back a little bit, and we appreciate that. And I thought it was kind of cool today when we were chatting with you when we first met up with you, and you told Lauren, you know, it's nice to finally meet you in person. I've seen you on TV, and I'm like, oh my God, now you're stroking the diva's ego again. Here we go. Watch out. But no, it is really cool. And all of our joking around aside, it is just for us to be able to have somebody that's in your position and how crazy busy it is right now and election time and everything going on. And we're going to talk a lot about that. For you to take time out of your day to come here and talk to our listeners, talk to our jail administrators, talk to our sheriffs is pretty cool for us because you have a font of knowledge that we're going to share today. But before we get to do that, we got to tell our listeners a little bit about this guy because he's kind of a big deal.
Yep. So Sheriff Mahoney is currently serving his fourth term as Dane County Sheriff. He was first elected in November 2006 to become the 52nd Dane County Sheriff. He's been a professional law enforcement officer for 41 years. 40 years of his law enforcement career have been with the Dane County Sheriff's Office, and he has extensive experience in labor management, having served 12 years as a local, state, and national labor executive officer. He is recognized as a progressive law enforcement executive who has spent the past 8 years moving the Sheriff's Office from a rules-based organization to a values-based organization, with emphasis on participatory management by his staff. He is very active locally, nationally, and internationally in emerging issues surrounding law enforcement. He is the current president of the National Sheriff's Association, and he has represented National Sheriff's Association on numerous committees, including White House Committee on Labor Management Relations, White House Committee to study police body cameras, Law Enforcement Executive Exchange Programs with Israel in 2011, 13, and 14, and National Sheriff's Association Committees on Global Affairs, Domestic Violence, and Training and Leadership. He is married to his high school sweetheart, Kathleen, who works for WEAC Trust, and they have 2 adult sons, Patrick and Sean.
41 years. You started when you were 12, right?
Well,
you didn't know they could do that back then. You could
No,
become
I didn't
cops
know
at
that.
12 years old.
I'll believe you.
It's changed a lot since
Yeah.
then.
a lot has changed.
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah,
It
it has
flown
changed.
by, Paul. It really has.
You know, it's amazing when I obviously you have 11 years in the business before I even started, and I did 30 years. And when you look back on it, I still feel like I'm Lauren's age. You know, I was your age when I came into law enforcement. I feel like it was yesterday, and now we're the old dogs. You know, I'm retired, and you look at where we're at in our careers, and more in the twilight than we are in the early beginnings. But it sure is a good ride, isn't it?
It sure is.
The best job ever. So we have a lot happening in the world right now, and as president of the NSA, you have a lot of irons and a lot of fires, as you talked about his committees and the things you're doing. So what do you got going on? I mean, I talk to you as we talk often, and you're on a committee call for this, or you're talking to nation sheriffs about this. You're in Washington D.C. Often, quite a bit of times. What have you been working on?
Well, you know, at the local level, there's a lot going on. As our communities are calling for more reforms in law enforcement. And so that only exemplifies or amplifies when you get up to the state level and the national level. As recently as last night, I was on phone calls on national issues revolving calls for law enforcement reform in police and sheriff's offices, as well as trying to address this thing called COVID, and then responding and keeping engaged with the community. Who, you know, Madison is a very progressive community. There's not a night that goes by that we don't have a protest. Our community, our largest city, Madison, doesn't look like it looked in January, and so, you know, keeping busy at the local, state, and national level is no problem.
And then sometime you try to sleep.
In between.
Try to take those little power naps. Yes, and remember them well. You know, in about a week, we have this little event happening called the national election. Everybody heard about that? You know?
Yeah, I think so.
But certainly not a funny. It's something, you know, as we see the whole nation so polarized right now, and the national elections and the national focus, because it's been such a contentious presidential race. What is your message to the nation's sheriffs for this upcoming election?
You know, over the past, I would say 3 weeks, there's been a lot of conversation at the national level on potential voter suppression or intimidation at the polls. And that's going to push down at the local level, down to our sheriffs. And so I think it's important that we keep in mind that as constitutionally elected officers, we have a responsibility to public safety. And one of those is to make sure that every citizen who is guaranteed the right to cast a vote for their candidate is protected. And that's what we as sheriffs are good at. We are the chief law enforcement officers in our communities. We are the people that the citizens come to, rely upon, and lean on to solve these kinds of issues. So, you know, sheriffs, what I push forward to you from a national level is to get engaged, be engaged with your county clerks, and make sure that all citizens are protected and have that right to cast this most important vote. Whether it's at the national level or at the local level, they're all important.
You know, it's interesting, and you and I actually had, you know, a conversation about this morning before we even had come on the air, talking about, you know, I think what happens so many times in the media, and it happens so often out there, is it gets polarized by media and whatever message is being sent, and by whatever side wants to do that. But when it comes down to it, you know, even though in some states sheriffs have to run under parties, we've all said that how many times where, you know, people would, like in North Dakota, we did not run under partisan politics. And I would have been adamant against that for, you know, if it ever tried to change that way. And I know you feel strongly about this, because I sat and listened to you for quite a few minutes this morning when we were talking about this, is that it doesn't matter. We as sheriffs and the nation's sheriffs that are out there, and all of you listening right now, when it comes down to it, we don't really care about party, do we?
No, we don't. You know, the responsibility we have is public safety.
Absolutely.
When a citizen is in crisis and they dial 911, we don't ask them what party they belong to.
Nor do we care.
Nor do we care, because we deliver the highest level of public safety and response based on the character and values of the men and women who wear the uniform from our sheriff's office. That's what matters. And at the end of the day, politics does not play a part in the role as a elected American sheriff.
Exactly. You represent all the people. And that's what I think is so special about the office of sheriff. Right now, you are the senior representative of all the sheriffs of America, all 3,000 plus sheriffs. As national president, you represent everyone, not the Republicans, not the Democrats, not the independents, not the libertarians, the sheriffs of America, and there's no party tied to that. And I think as not only our law enforcement listeners, but if we have civilian listeners as well, is to realize that your sheriff is your direct representation of you and of all of you, not a party part of you. And I think that's important that we as sheriffs continue that message across the country, whether you're active, whether we're retired, that strength of the office of sheriff and representing your people in your county is the message that needs to be sent, and it needs to be sent by all of us.
Well, I mentioned earlier a little bit about reforms, and there's discussion about community policing. There is no office that is more engaged in community policing than your elected sheriff.
Absolutely.
From the first sheriff that crawled on horseback in a small town out west or out east, it didn't matter. We created community policing.
Absolutely.
And it's because we're engaged with the communities that we serve.
When you look at when the buzzword community policing came about, and it became a philosophy within law enforcement, and even though a lot of people in the rhetoric in the country nowadays and right now is been anti-police in some venues, the fact that we are probably the masters at ever changing and adapting to our environments and adapting to our community needs. And a lot of when the word community policing was used, we as in the sheriff's world all went, we've been doing that for 200 years.
Since the first sheriff,
like you said,
crawled on
a horse and rode off to defend and support and protect his or her community. And I think that's a message that we have to continue to not only send but demonstrate to our public.
Yeah.
And which I know leads into a question you have about the public and the people we serve.
Yeah, so we kind of talked about the national election, but it's pretty clear like the local level elections are just as important. What are your thoughts for our listeners regarding their local?
Every citizen has the right to get out, cast a vote. And I would hope that in this upcoming election, that with all the discussion about voter suppression and intimidation, that the citizens know that their elected sheriff, is out there making sure that they cast that vote with the freedoms that they are given by this great nation, and that we will be there for public safety. We are connected to the communities we serve. We're elected by the communities that we serve, and we have built the trust and legitimacy of the office of sheriff by working with our communities.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I think that message is something that sometimes get lost in a lot of the rhetoric, and I wish some of the media would pick up more on that message and go in and learn their offices and go in and learn their law enforcement agencies rather than just jump on a lot of the bandwagons that I see happening, because I think that they're going to find is as they get to know their local sheriff's office and their local police departments, they're going to find how engaged they are. And I think right now, is a perfect time for the sheriffs of America to make sure that they open those doors and be transparent and show what we're all about, because that's the true law enforcement in this country.
Well, in my own county, I have 10 cities and 22 villages within my own county, that there's not a deputy that goes to work every day that isn't in every one of those communities. Mm-hmm. Every one of those cities has deputies traveling through there, backing up city officers or responding or bringing in special resources that they rely upon the sheriff to provide, and it's of a high quality of law enforcement. And as you said, most citizens don't understand or don't know what their local sheriff provides for them. And that's another responsibility of sheriffs to get that message out there.
Yeah, I agree. And I think a lot of times it's funny is when the public stops to think, they sometimes think, like we come out of the patrol station and we get in our cars and we go out and do our thing, and then at the end of the shift, they bring you back to the patrol station, they lock you in your piece of glass for the day until you go back on your next shift. No, when they come home and when they finish their shift, they take off that uniform and they become members of those communities. Their kids go to school in those communities. They serve on school boards and they serve on Little League, things. They're coaches. And our people, our officers, our deputies are as much as part of the community as they are the protectors and guardians of those communities. And I think that's incumbent upon us. We have to get that message out so that the public, especially during these trying times when we're under attack like we never have been before, that they see the real us.
Well, as sheriffs, we have a special responsibility, as do the men and women who work with the authority of the sheriff in our jails. We are charged with, we are the only law enforcement that is charged with maintaining a jail.
Right.
And ensuring that people who are in our custody are safe, that they're treated humanely, and in accordance with law. We're the only ones. And that's why every one of us who is an elected sheriff have a distinct responsibility to make sure that the men and women who wear our uniform are of high character and high value.
Absolutely. Well, you and I, we served on the NSA Board of Directors together during my active time as sheriff. I served 2 terms on the Board of Directors, and I know very well that you, as the NSA National President, you have to give so much attention to so many specific and diverse issues that affect the office of sheriff. What are some of the issues that you're currently working on, that you're concerned about, and need the attention of the sheriffs of our country?
Going back to February of this year with the outbreak of COVID in our nation, sheriffs have been on the forefront, at the front of the spear, if you will, in making sure that PPE or protective equipment is there for not only our staff, but for law enforcement throughout our county, and to make sure that there's also a supply of protective equipment for our hospitals and for the citizens. I mentioned a little bit about jails. It continues to be, and has been for years, a major emphasis of the National Sheriff's Association, working with National Institute of Corrections and the Counties Association, NACO, to deal with jail mental health. The fact that, our largest mental health institutions are county jails all across this country. L.A., Cook County in Chicago, Rikers Island out in New York, the 3 largest mental health institutions in our nation, and they're run by sheriffs.
Absolutely.
And that's why there needs to be a national voice on how we deal with mental illness. Should mental illness be a crime? Should we be incarcerating people who are in our jails with severe mental illness? And we are at the forefront legislatively now talking about those issues with our elected lawmakers. Also, we're very engaged in this discussion nationwide on police reforms, on policy, on practices, on training, on recruitment of staff. And another area that we've worked very closely with NACO on is the Medicare reforms. The fact that, when an individual is incarcerated in one of our jails, they lose Medicare benefits.
Yeah, they sure do. And I think a lot of people out there don't realize that. I know most in the general public probably don't realize that falls on their tax dollars the second that individual comes into your jail.
Absolutely. When you talk about the jails being the largest mental health institutions and the number of people who are on very costly psychotropic medications, it's being paid for by the taxpayer of those counties because they've lost their benefits.
Right.
Now, there's very recent legislation that has come down that even as soon as the end of this month, rather than losing those benefits, Medicare will be temporarily halted, but also, just off the presses, Medicare benefits will reinstate 30 days before release from institution.
That's big news, and I know every sheriff and jail administrator that's listening right now, just if you didn't know that, sat back and went, wow, that's big. That's big for my facility. That's big for our taxpayers. I know you talk about everything you just mentioned, and having been in that fray, and I ran a 350-bed jail when I was sheriff, and we were one of those that we, like, as you said, tried to be progressive, and we had a full-time mental health coordinator in our facility. We received a BJA grant back in 2008, and we implemented that. She became one of our full-time staff in the jail, and she told me that one day. She came up to me. We were at one of our just finishing up a meeting. She said, "Do you realize, Sheriff, that you run the largest mental health institution in the state of North Dakota?" And I said, "Yep, I do." And what can we do about that to make that better? And so it's exciting to hear on the national front that stuff's happening. I can't tell you how many times we were so frustrated because you want to talk about inmate reform and you want to talk about doing some of these things, and then the second they come in, you dump all their benefits and put it on the local taxpayer, and then when they come back out, they had to reapply, they had to reinstate, they had to go through the whole hoops again. Well, that's not exactly helping the situation with these inmates.
All it is doing is speeding up that revolving door of people re-entering our system in the first place.
Absolutely. Well, that's encouraging. That's exciting to hear, and you're hearing it here right from the mouth of the national president. That and if you hadn't heard about that, research it, look into it, and hopefully that is something that is going to be able to positively affect your jail for all of you here in the near future.
Yeah.
So
there's more of it coming. There's more legislation revolving around Medicare reforms occurring every day.
A lot of times people, and I'm just going to kind of take a little sidetrack here, because I used to get asked a lot of the times when I was sheriff, and you're the Dane County Sheriff. I was the Cass County, North Dakota Sheriff. There's 3,000 plus sheriffs in the nation, about 3,080. Yeah, I was going to say 82, and we all come from a county in a state. And a lot of times people will ask, why do you get involved at the state level? Why do you get involved at the national level? Your job should be right here in your own backyard. By getting involved at the state level and the national level, you're taking care of your backyard. And here's an perfect example of that is why we like sheriffs to get involved in their state associations and in the national association, because this is the kind of positive impact we had. And that's one of the things I missed that was always so fun was being in on that fray, being in going to Washington, D.C. and defending the office of sheriff and trying to bring about positive change from that front that we could take back that at the end of the day affected my backyard in Cass County, North Dakota, because this ruling, like the perfect example right here, will impact the taxpayers in Cass County, North Dakota, in Dane County, Wisconsin.
Good example. I'm traveling to Washington, D.C. regularly, have been as long as I've been on NSA's board. And every time I come back, I put out a press release on what occurred while in Washington, D.C., and whether it's meeting in the Oval Office with the President of the United States or the Attorney General on DOJ-related issues, or meeting with lawmakers in Congress or the Senate. And my community recognizes the importance of having a voice of Dane County, Wisconsin, and Washington, D.C., besides our lawmakers.
Absolutely.
Our senators, our congressmen and women certainly do a great job, but they like to hear that the chief law enforcement officer is also talking about the values of our community and the needs of our community as it relates to public safety.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so many times, you don't send a non-expert in to talk about something that has that expertise. And a lot of times we've seen that, whether it was just running off the cuff, ill-intended, or just didn't know what they were talking about. You see times where you have congressional people talking about something they have no idea, or they saw it in a movie, or they saw it on TV, or they saw something. All of a sudden that became the reality where we can go in and bring that honest law enforcement perspective in. And, like I said, I know it's trying times right now, and our profession's taking a beating, but at the same time, at the end of the day, truth and honor is always going to prevail. And at the end of this rough road, we're going to come out stronger than we were before and better than we were before, because the true honor of law enforcement is the real thing. And that dedication and commitment, those men and women who suit up every single day and go out and get it done right, that's what's going to rule.
They don't come to work every day looking for a job. They were called to do this work.
Absolutely. Yeah. I used to always say, and I meant this, I would maybe say it as not even facetiously, people would say, how was the job of sheriff? I said, I never had a job for 30 years. For 30 years, I never had a job. I had a passion that I got to go do every day. When I was elected sheriff of my county, was like the people of this county picked me to be their chief law enforcement officer in my county, and that was a responsibility that I was never going to ever give just second rate to, or just give token. It was I lived to go to work, and I lived for that passion. And anybody that knows you emanate it, and it's just in our blood. You're right, we're called to that. I didn't have a job for 30 years, but I was pretty glad they paid me to do it. You kind of want to put that food on the table thing and all that. But it is a way of life. It is a calling, and in the end, I truly believe that good is always going to prevail over bad. And while it's a bumpy road right now, spurred on by a lot of things, in the end, truth will stand tall.
It is a bumpy road, and some of those roads have major hills attached to them. But we've been here before, and we'll be there again, quite honestly. We just need to weather the storm, do what we were called to do, which is ensure public safety in our communities, hold the highest standard of character and values, and in the end, we'll prevail.
Absolutely.
Speaking of kind of bumpy roads, one topic that we wanted to ask you about was recruiting and retention, because that's obviously a hot topic right now. And 2 episodes ago, we had Sheriff Jim Stewart, and he kind of touched on it. And then we had Carrie Wooten on last episode, and she really dug into it. But we wanted to know, from your perspective, what are you seeing in your chair with recruiting and retention?
With all the rhetoric playing out in the media and the demands for some of them very unrealistic demands for law enforcement as part of the community reforms, we are seeing a reduction in young people coming out of college and out of other professions wanting to enter a profession where they were called to service to others before oneself. Matter of fact, I'm seeing deputies who left a profession who are going back to their former profession. This is a storm that we have to weather, but we have to stay on top of, because we're also seeing men and women leaving at retirement age. And it's not something where we can put an ad in the paper and hire somebody the next day. It's about a year's worth of training.
Yeah, we don't just go down to job service and say, "Hey, I'm short 4 on my shift in the jail and 3 out in patrol tonight. Can you send me 7 over? I'll need them for about a week." That don't happen.
It doesn't, and so this reduction in applicants and the disenchantment of active duty law enforcement, we have to stay on top of as administrators, as sheriffs, to make sure that the resources are there when they're needed, but also that the demands and needs of our community are met.
I always put a lot of it on myself, and I think we as law enforcement leaders need to look inside ourselves too and say we have a responsibility. And we kind of talked about a little bit earlier about getting that message out so that these young people, the Laurens of the world and her generation, say, I want to go do that. And we can't just fall back on, well, it's really a tough time right now. Yes, it is. It very much is. So we have to step up and go out and go recruit those solid people that are going to uphold the honor that we have and uphold the duties that we perform.
Well, and it's a responsibility of every sheriff, every jail administrator, and quite honestly, every deputy. Our best recruiters
absolutely
are our deputies.
Absolutely.
And they know somebody, they associate with somebody, they go to church or go out after work with somebody who potentially could be that next generation of law enforcement officer if they meet the standards that
absolutely.
We can't compromise on.
We can't, and that's one of the things that I fear with some of the demands, that uneducated demands that are being put out there for reform is going to drive away those solid candidates who look at that and say, I can go make a lot more money doing this versus going out and serving my community. And what happens when you start to see that, and it's not something that happens overnight, but as we know, then, well, okay, are we going to open now? If you had a misdemeanor offense within the last 3 years, okay, you had a speeding ticket or you had a loud party arrest when you were in college or something like that. Pretty soon you start to get, well, how bad was that felony? God forbid our country would ever bring us down that path because then you will get what you fear in this country. That's exactly what will start happening if we have to lower our standards. And you're right, we can't and we won't.
We can't, but it's even harder to put it into action than to say it.
Absolutely.
You know, I just think back to the number of applicants that come across my desk, like you said, made a mistake in their life, and maybe you want to say, you know, okay, it'll fill a position. You just cannot compromise. It may mean having to wait another year for that person to show that over that coming year that they're going to change that behavior. We can't wait while they're wearing the uniform.
No, we can't, and I totally agree. And I think, you know, we're preaching to the choir out here, and every sheriff that's listening to us is going, absolutely. I want to hire the best of the best. I will only put out the best of the best. And do mistakes happen? Of course they do. We understand that. But the stronger the candidate, the stronger the training. You know, the more that's invested into the department, not taken away from the department, helps us turn out stronger, better law enforcement personnel, and that's what we have to be looking at.
Yep. Well, we are preaching to the choir, but they're feeling the same pain we are.
Absolutely, they sure are.
Yeah. Well, I can imagine a big part of that is just being able to communicate effectively with the community. And as a citizen who would want to be involved with, you know, my sheriff's office, every citizen out there that wants to be involved, what's the best way for someone to communicate with their sheriff?
Well, you know, with the onset of social media and the large variety of social media, to reach out to your local sheriff's office, send an email, get on Twitter, get on Facebook, and ask for a meeting. Reach out through your neighborhood association and ask for the sheriff to come talk to the neighborhood association. Or if you're on a town board, every sheriff in this country will come out to talk to their oversights. If it's county board, if it's county administration, just make that ask, because that's what sheriffs do best. They go out, they engage, they build legitimacy and trust, and rely upon this community policing philosophy that we actually created. So, you know, as we move forward as a profession, law enforcement just needs to, particularly in this time of polarization, reach out to the community, and community reach out to law enforcement and help bridge that relationship.
You know, we're going to, in one of our upcoming shows here in the near future, we're going to be talking and have a number of guests on from the law enforcement world that communicate different ways to their citizens. And, you know, we all had different ways. I had a radio show when I was sheriff for 2 years where I reached out. We have a lot of different ways we can communicate. And I would urge every single one of you listening is to find, you know, your backyards. Every sheriff knows their backyard. They know their people. They know what they want to hear, and embrace that and open up your office to that transparency and find different ways to communicate. So that like the question you just asked, Lauren, was a great question, because how do we communicate to your generation? How do we communicate to our seniors that are out there and make them feel comfortable? And there's so many different ways. And I think Dave's message is solid to every single one of us, is to find what works in your backyard and utilize it.
Well, even our 911 centers are going to text 911, you know, because people aren't calling 911 anymore. They're sending a text message asking for a deputy sheriff or a paramedic. And so we have to be available to change with new technologies as well.
Right.
I just implemented an app so that you can put the sheriff's office app on your local phone or on your smartphone and communicate directly with the jail administrator, the sheriff, a deputy. And it's working well.
Well, as a social media and content expert, I would say that's kind of
I was going to say, you hit the nail on the head with, especially with recruiting, and we kind of talked about that with Carrie Wooten, being on social media. The people that you're going to be recruiting is my generation and younger, and they're all on social media. So,
well, you know, Lauren, I'm taking applications.
I don't know. I don't know if they'll let go of me
right
here
in the
JailTalk.
studio. He's blatantly recruiting. Wow.
We'll talk later, off air.
Well, you know, Sheriff, we are coming to the end of the show, Dave, and you know, kind of, what final? I guess I would say, what final message do you have to our nation's law enforcement leaders? Obviously, most of our listening audience is sheriffs and jail administrators and their leadership teams and their deputies. But I'm sure there are a lot of law enforcement officers in general who have picked up on the show that we've seen and are looking for some words of wisdom. And you represent every sheriff in the nation right now. What final pieces of advice you'd have? And I do realize, Lauren, I just handed a sheriff a microphone and an open topic.
Well, you know what's worse than one sheriff?
What's that?
And a microphone? 2. And I'm looking at them, so we might be here a while.
Well, if you need to leave for lunch, that's
right.
fine. We'll
I'll
carry
come
on.
back and turn the recording off later.
You know, the worst part is she's right.
Well, it was touched on earlier. I'm in my 41st year of law enforcement. And this profession has changed a lot over that period of time. But what hasn't changed are the challenges. There will always be challenges. And we just need to weather the storm and always keep our organizations headed in that northern direction and weather the storm, so to speak. And we'll get there as long as we stay true to character and values. It's also been a distinct honor and privilege to represent our sheriffs. I would have never imagined 41 years ago the privilege and the honor that I feel having been elected by the people of my county to represent their needs, their desires, and their caliber of public safety. It's hard to even put that in words. I remember the sheriff prior to me talking about that. I feel it even deeper having lived it. Now being in my fourth term, I wouldn't say that I'm comfortable, but one of the responsibilities I have as national president is to be there to help mentor new sheriffs. And I see that as a responsibility to the office of sheriff as well, to make sure that this great profession doesn't compromise on our character, and that our sheriffs nationwide receive the resources they need. They receive the support they need from Washington, D.C. to do their job, and that our citizens know that as the chief law enforcement officers in our county, that we are not dictated by politics. We are dictated by the right thing at the right time for the right reasons. That's what defines the office of sheriff.
Well, a very strong message, and I can tell you from years of working with you as a mentor, they don't come any better than you. And as we look out into the sheriff's world, there's so many out there that we can all learn from, and I would strongly encourage all of our listeners, our sheriffs, get involved in your state associations, get involved in your national associations. It's not about, some people will say, oh, you just like to go to a junket conference or something along those lines. It's never like that. When you go to these, the information, the training, the knowledge you get to bring back, the mentorship you get from men like this, from the men and women who have been in the game for a long time, that bring it back to all of us is second to none. And you walk the walk you talk, my friend. You always have. And I can't tell you what a privilege it has been to have you here at JailTalk, to get a chance to visit with you a little bit and to take your knowledge. You have such useful information to be able to share that with our nation's sheriffs and our jail administrators and all of our listeners. So on behalf of Lauren and I, thank you very much.
Well, thank you to JailTalk for holding these podcasts. It's important.
We're going to keep doing it. This is, we've said here at Turnkey, this is our way of giving back to the sheriffs and to our jail administrators, and our way of saying thank you for everything they do. And our owner, Todd, is very adamant that we're going to do this and give back. And we're having a lot of fun doing it. We get to have a lot of fun doing these, but our message is very, very serious and what we want to do with this. So again, thank you. You put words to action, because it's like the motto of the National Sheriff's Association: no sheriff walks alone. Amen, brother. Amen. Thank you for being here.
You bet.
I'm Paul Laney.
And I'm Lauren Matthews.
You've been listening to JailTalk, and we'll see you next time.